Hey everyone, I'm Tyson Alger. I'm joined by Connor Letourneau, and don't get confused. It's still the middle of summer. We're usually here during basketball season. We will be talking a little bit of basketball here, but it's off-season basketball. Today it's the start of the kind of the July recruiting period. We figured it would be a good time for us to kind of take a look at what Oregon and Oregon State have been doing for the last couple months since the season ended, and also what's kind of going on around the rest of the Pac-12. Connor, how's your summer been going? And Oregon State, what have they been up to?
My summer has been going well, and it looks like Oregon State's summer is going decently well. Kind of some of the bigger news to come out of Oregon State this summer is just Victor Robbins was dismissed from the program last month. Wasn't a huge surprise. Obviously, he had been suspended mid-season, and then while he was suspended, he got a DUI. Was then put on that indefinite suspension.
That's usually not the right thing to do.
Right. Yeah. So it didn't look like the prospects of him coming back were high anyway. He apparently, according to Wayne Tinkle, did not meet his requirements for that indefinite suspension and was dismissed from the team. That opened up a scholarship, which they ended up using on a guy named Kendall Manuel from Billings, Montana. Gives them two signees from Montana, which is interesting because the state of Montana hasn't had two high major signees in a long time. They haven't had a high major signee since Josh Eustace at Stanford. A few years ago. So big deal for that state. Kendall Manuel plays on the same AAU team as Trace Tinkle, very good friends with him. Wayne Tinkle has followed his career for the past 4 years. He sees him as kind of a hidden gem type player. He's still growing into his body, but he really came on strong his senior year, leading Skyview High School to the state title. Oregon State was his only Division I offer. I would not be surprised if he redshirted next year, but they see him as kind of a long-term project that will pay off for them.
Just don't sleep on those Montana guys, man. As a Montana graduate, I can tell you I have seen zero Montana high school basketball. So, as for Oregon, I mean, it's been, I would say, probably one of the better off seasons they've had in quite some time. They lost a big piece in Joseph Young, who ended up going in the second round to the Pacers, I believe 42nd overall pick. Something like that. Yeah, somewhere around there. But they were able to ink a big transfer, Dylan Ennis from Villanova. They were able to get the National Junior College Player of the Year in Chris Boucher. Is that what we're deciding on? Boucher, he's Canadian, so you could get a little bit of that distinction there at the end. And they have a really nice recruiting class coming in. It's highlighted by Tyler Dorsey, who just kind of lit it up at the U18 tournament out in Europe. So I mean, there's a lot of positives coming around there. And I mean, just compared to where they were a year ago, that kind of atrocious offseason they've had, I think the Dana Altman and the Oregon staff is feeling pretty good about this offseason right now.
And you got the chance to talk to Altman. Did he say anything?
Yeah, no, it was a very much a everything's just kind of going according to plan. They were just about to hit the road to go out on the July recruiting trips, but he said they don't. The one thing with Ennis and Dorsey is they haven't signed letter of intents yet. Dorsey I think this was back in the spring, said he just didn't want to be limited by that in case something happened where a coach leaves or something. But obviously Altman's not allowed to talk about players specifically, but he said everything is going to be going according to plan, according to what people have heard or read so far. So that should be going great, and he's been happy with what he's seen from some of his guys in the off season, especially Dylan Brooks, who's been playing for Canada in the U18s. Jordan Bell, who injured his foot earlier this spring, Coach Altman said he should be ready in time for workouts this fall as well, too. So just kind of status quo, everything's going good.
So as you mentioned, the July recruiting period started yesterday. We are not the recruiting writers. We have a guy named Andrew Nimick, who that is his beat, but we've been keeping a little bit of tabs on it. What are you kind of expecting from them? They have a couple open scholarships, right, to fill?
Yeah,
2016.
Yeah, they have two to fill. I mean, I don't keep a great track on who's all on their radar, but I mean this recruiting class they have coming in with Dorsey and Manuel and Kendall Small. I mean, that's probably one of their better ones yet, and it just seems like this program's kind of building some momentum there. It wouldn't surprise me if they go out and are able to lure somebody big, because they've somehow been able to do that kind of recently. I think this is one of the bigger upswings this program's had in quite some time lately.
It seems like they're in the mix for everyone. The Greek big man announced that he's staying pro.
They lost out on Papagiannis. They lost out on the guy who ended up going to Kentucky.
Another Canadian.
Yeah, another Canadian guy who a lot of people thought, maybe Oregon had a chance with Dylan Brooks there and Boucher coming there, kind of get that Canadian triumphant there. But and I asked Altman if there's any consolation to losing out on a high quality recruit like that, like just to have their name out there, because what it came down on, like the ESPN Canadians ESPN Sports Center, the guy picking the teams, and it's between Kentucky and Oregon, and it's not a lot of times you see Oregon with Kentucky on in the basketball field anyway. And Altman didn't really buy into that. He's like, we lost out on them. It's it's great that our logo was out there, but we lost out on them. We could have used a player like that. So it's been awfully interesting.
Oregon State is standing pat with their roster for next season. They have the full 13 filled now, much different spot than they were at a year ago. But they will actually have 5 open spots in the 2016 class because they have 5 seniors.
Yep.
And so this is going to be a really important few weeks for them to start building off of their momentum from this 2015 class. Randomly, there's a lot of talent coming out of Utah right now. There's like 4 or 5 guys in the top 100.
Man, you just don't like these mountain states, man. You're all
and I know that Oregon State is targeting at least several of those guys. There's several big men in Southern California that they're looking at, and they're one name that we should definitely would be remiss if we didn't mention is Peyton Pritchard, the star point guard out of Westland High School. He's mentioned Oregon as a possibility. He recently decommitted from Oklahoma, and he has not listed Oregon State, but I'm hearing that he might have some interest in Oregon State. So that'll be a big recruiting battle to watch in the coming weeks for sure. I know he wants to commit somewhere again in the fall. But I'll have a full rundown on what Oregon State's plans are later today.
So looking at the rest of the Pac-12, I know earlier this summer you kind of did a way too early look at where the Pac-12 teams might line up for next year, and I don't think a whole lot has changed from that. I would still say Arizona's probably the front runner, but boy, Cal really kind of bolstered their lineup.
Yeah, they bring in Jaylen Brown, who, depending on what recruiting service you look at, he's number 2 or number 3 nationally. That was a huge recruiting coup for them. And he's paired with Ivan Rabb, another top 10 guy. Those are 2 strong candidates to be one and done. You add those 2 guys to a roster that's already bringing back first-team All-Pac-12 player in Tyrone Wallace, and then Jabari Bird and Jordan Matthews, that they should have not only the best starting 5 in the Pac-12, but arguably the best in the country, at least up there with Maryland and maybe Kentucky and those schools. Who
do you think is going to have a better chance at replacing their kind of star guy that the offense ran through? Utah with DeLon Wright or Oregon with Joseph Young?
I think Oregon, because they bring in an absolute stud in Dorsey.
Yeah.
Dorsey, what did he average? 36 points per game?
Yeah, he was only like 36 and 10. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, he's another one-and-done possibility. I would not be surprised if he came in and averaged in the teens as a freshman, was maybe their leading scorer.
Well, and what I like about Dorsey's chances is, you bring in a guy like Ennis who's kind of a true point guard sort of thing, so you're not going to have Dorsey responsible for handling the ball 90% of the time like Joseph Young was last year. He's going to be able to get open, get his shots. And I really like Ennis coming in to be able to facilitate guys like Dylan Brooks as well, too, because I think Dorsey and Brooks and then are going to be one of the best 1-2 combos in the conference next year. And then you kind of forget that a guy like Elgin Cook, who was a Pac-12 all-conference player last year, he's a very quiet, 15 point per game sort of guy.
Mm-hmm.
So.
No, I think it's going to be a really top-heavy conference next year. I think the top 5 or 6 teams in the conference are going to be great. I think there
are going to be some terrible teams in the
conference. But there also are going to be, when I did that rankings, that power rankings, back in April, actually it was now, I noticed that, there could be 6 tournament teams from this conference, but the bottom half are teams that probably are going to have a tough time even making the NIT. There's going to be quite the divide. But looking again at the top of the conference, Arizona is going to be an interesting team because they do lose so much, but it
Yeah,
is Arizona,
yeah.
and they restock so well. They lose T.J. McConnell, Brandon Ashley, Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, Stanley Johnson, all of whom are playing with NBA teams this summer. But
they got Tarczewski coming back.
They got a couple key pieces coming back, and then they're adding Kadeem Allen, who, if you remember, redshirted last year, but before that was the JUCO Player of the Year. And then they have a couple big recruits in Alonzo Trey, Ray Smith, and then they're adding big-time transfers in Ryan Anderson from Boston College, who I got to see in my days covering the ACC. He's a solid
back in the day,
2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
But he's a solid piece that could be an all Pac-12 type guy. And then Mark Tollefson, who should be a rotation guy who's coming from San Francisco. So they'll be right up there with Cal. And I honestly think Oregon is right in the mix just because of this offseason they had.
I think the biggest key for this conference is, like you said, there's going to be 5 or 6 really good teams. And the scare there is maybe they'll beat up on each other a little bit in the conference season. So I think a lot of these teams got to really, especially the ones that are projected to be the front runners, really kind of take care of their non-conference schedule. Because, with how bad some of the teams are going to be in this conference too, those wins against Washington and Washington State aren't really going to be padding your resume really much when it comes to RPI and those sort of things. And Oregon just released their full non-conference schedule, and there are some tough teams in there. I believe it was I think it was 4 NCAA tournament teams from a year ago. So Oregon will at least have the opportunity to play some tough teams.
They're playing
Valparaiso, Baylor, UC Irvine, and there's one other in there.
Well, Oregon State has not totally released their non-conference schedule, but I have a pretty good idea what it's going to look like. They're playing Kansas in mid-December in Kansas City. It's going to be a big game. I think they're playing Valparaiso as well, and then they're playing kind of some lesser mid-major teams throughout their non-conference schedule. But one thing that we haven't touched upon is Oregon had a transfer last week, right?
Oh yeah. Sorry, yeah. Oregon point guard Ahmad Rory, he transferred over to Montana, which wasn't a huge surprise. Just with Ennis coming in and Dorsey and Small Kendall Small is another guard as well. And then you also have Casey Benson in there. I just wouldn't see where Rory was going to get his minutes. And he was an okay player last year. He didn't really hurt the team. He didn't go in there and turn the ball over or anything. But he didn't really have much of a scoring touch that Oregon needed, and he just wasn't going to get any minutes this year. So that wasn't a huge surprise there.
You think he could probably be a nice player for a Montana team that.
There you go. Trashing Montana again.
I'm not trashing Montana. I'm saying that he could be a nice player for a team that won the Big Sky.
Oh yeah, Montana would just love to have anybody scraps. This guy. No. Honestly, he would be a really nice player for them in the Big Sky over there. And if he needs any tips on places to eat around campus, I know some places.
Awesome.
On that note, I mean, you got anything else that the viewers need to know right now?
The only other thing of note, Gary Payton II played in the Nike Basketball Academy a couple weeks ago, which featured the top 20 players in college basketball, according to Nike at least, and did pretty well. He showcased an improved passing game, impressed some scouts, got the chance to talk to him. He felt pretty good about how he did there. But I think that'll only help him going forward as a leader of this team next year. Excellent.
Well, you probably won't see from us again from a basketball perspective, probably up until the Pac-12 media days, I would guess. But there's a chance if they allow us to be on camera anymore, which is kind of a sketchy ordeal in itself, we may be doing this sort of thing for football. That's coming up rapidly. I believe fall camp for Oregon starts in just about a month, and same for Oregon State, obviously. So we'll be back for football, we'll be back for basketball, and heck, we might even talk a little baseball at some point too.